Possiamo prendere posto?
Can you please take your seats so that we can start our proceedings?
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everybody. Let's start this International Day for anti-corruption, dedicated to juridical diplomacy at service of peace and international security, in which we will talk about the commitment of Italy in combating corruption. I will give the floor to the Ambassador Ettore Francesco Secchi, Secretary General, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, for his introduction. Yes, thank you, dear Mr. Vice President of the Council, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Minister of the Interior and Minister of Justice, ladies and gentlemen and authorities present here in this room. Welcome to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for this first event in a series of events that fall within the Global Day program that we will host. This is an initiative open to the public and open to the civil society, the economic world, and the business world and other institutions. We will talk about the important international issues that will shape the future of the planet in the next decades and that are intermingled with the protection and safeguarding of Italian national interests. We start today with juridical diplomacy, and this is not by chance, because on December 9th we will celebrate the National Day Against Corruption. And then this year, the 30th anniversary of the killings that took place in Capaci and Via D'Amelio. The intuitions of judges Falcone and Borsellino are still today a source of inspiration for international cooperation against crime. Combating corruption is a main pillar in the Italian politics, because it hinders development, sustainable development, protection of human rights and democracy, and it puts at stake peace, stability, and security. It is a link that the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations has highlighted a lot, and President Tajani reminds us all that there could not be peace or real development without justice. That's why when we talk about juridical diplomacy, we talk about diplomacy of security, diplomacy, economic diplomacy, and development cooperation. These are all fields in which Italy is highly committed in the world, is highly engaged in the world with all its ministries and relevant institutions. The outcome of this joint action is the success that we have had in widespreading the juridical elements and good practices of our country that is today a point of reference at world level in the fight against corruption and illegality. We know that the international cooperation at judicial level and police level has to be strengthened, and in this Italy has a very active role. First of all, with the harmonization of the standards at international level promoted at the G20, United Nations, OECD, and the European Union. And then we promote programs of technical assistance in the field of justice and security to strengthen the institutional organizations of those countries that would like to benefit of the Italian experience. And then the coordination at national level of anti-corruption activities sees our presence at the institutional table institutional group created by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have experts and people that are working in our embassies abroad that are working a lot, and many of them are following this day in streaming together with our ambassadors, and in remote we have the prefects, the quaestors, and the judicial and law enforcement agency representatives connected, so that they participate in streaming to this event. So I welcome you all and I greet you all. And then I would like to thank Mr. Bruno Vespa and Mrs. Giancarla Rondinelli for accepting the invitation to moderate this event, Ambassador Lo Monaco that has organized this event. Thank you all, and I wish you a fruitful day.
Sarà proiettato ora
Now we will see on screen a short video produced by the program entitled Falcone and Borsellino Assistance Initiative at international level by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Security and Development, coordinated by the Global Cooperation Group in favor of Latin American Caribbean world. The values of legality, integrity, and responsibility is one of the pillars of the Italian action in the capacity building against corruption. Juridical diplomacy accompanies and strengthens international cooperation and judicial cooperation. The video recalls some of the most important statements made by Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino.
Gli uomini passano, le idee restano le loro tensioni morali e continueranno a camminare sulle gambe di altri uomini.
Chi ha paura muore ogni giorno, chi non ha paura muore una volta sola.
Possiamo sempre fare qualcosa. Massima che andrebbe scolpita sullo scranno di ogni magistrato e di ogni poliziotto.
Parlate della mafia, parlatene alla televisione, in radio, sui giornali, però parlatene.
Ci si dimentica che il successo delle mafie è dovuto al loro essere dei modelli vincenti per la gente e che lo Stato non ce la farà fin quando non sarà diventato esso stesso un modello vincente.
La lotta alla mafia deve essere innanzitutto un movimento culturale che abitui tutti a sentire la bellezza del fresco profumo della libertà, che si oppone al puzzo del compromesso morale, dell'indifferenza, della contiguità e quindi della complicità.
Se la gioventù le negherà il consenso, anche l'onnipotente e misteriosa mafia svanirà come un incubo.
Perché una società vada bene, si muova nel progresso, nell'esaltazione dei valori della famiglia, dello spirito, del bene, dell'amicizia. Perché prosperi senza contrasti tra i vari consociati, per avviarsi serena nel cammino verso un domani migliore, basta che ognuno faccia il suo dovere.
Good morning, everybody. Well, these images are particularly hard for those who, like me, was the director of broadcasting news, director of TG1. And I had to tell the news about this and Aldo Moro's killing. I must say that in the memory and testimony of Falcone and Borsellino, we try to to have the state replace mafia as the winning model in the head and in the mind of many people and in the action of many people. We have 3 key ministers discussing this problem, this issue, and we will try and understand in this short conversation what is the state of the art in the fight against mafia, fight against corruption, with the updates, with the relevant updates, the latest news of fight against corruption says that Italy made a step forward because from 52nd place we are now to 42nd place in the ranking. It's not such a big result, but it's 10 places in 1 year, and I must say that this is great result, brilliant result. Okay, so because there are 2 different types of corruption. Corruption, you do me a favor, I give you some money, and corruption, and this is what Falcone and Borsellino are referring to, is also international corruption, that is the intertwining between mafia and corruption, which is more complicated. So I would like to ask Minister Piantedosi, what is the link between corruption and organized crime? Good morning, Minister. Good morning, everybody. Dr. Betzpa, will allow me to thank and welcome Minister Tajani and Segui for this beautiful initiative and for the kind invitation to attend this meeting. Well, the intertwining, the link between these 2 phenomena, which are criminal phenomena, but also social phenomena, there is a very close link between these 2 activities. You refer to our experience, and today the classical scheme, the classical pattern around the organized crime, which casts its shadows on many other criminal aspects. Well, here we have this organized crime associations to have like money laundering activities and the money that they get from drug trafficking. Obviously, money laundering is possible if you can corrupt, if there is the possibility of corruption of public institutions and private individuals. So money laundering may make sense if there is a complicity, and here we have many pieces of evidence in our system. So the answer to your question starts from the prerequisite that corruption and money laundering are closely intertwined and certainly represent a big problem in our countries. And the international context is unfortunately sort of organized crime. There is organized crime at international level. Obviously, all this has implications, because sometimes we say, oh, there is less violence, but there is corruption. And so in terms of law enforcement, we may think that this has been an evolution with less negative elements, but this is not so, because corruption then forges all aspects of our society and affects all aspects of our societies, because it affects also what so-called white collars, so professionals that may offer their professional activity to spread this phenomenon, to help spread this phenomenon, and it leads to cannibalization of private individuals, because for money laundering you must have entrepreneurs, apparently clean entrepreneurs that are involved and are involved and cannibalized because they need a clean face, but of course their decision-making activities replaced. And obviously in Italy, we have an expertise, we have moments of excellence, and we have seen recently with our approach to to resources that have been invested during the pandemic. And now this is a great bet in terms of architecture and law enforcement that has to be implemented in PNR, because the national plan because we are speaking of 250 billion euro that will certainly have a great impact on our economy in the next few years. We cannot afford wasting this or missing this opportunity. So now we have our experience, our expertise in our country, and we obviously rely on our international partners. Recently, monitoring system was started, so economic national economy monitoring system, and this was borrowed at the European level with Working Group 19. Obviously, so this monitoring is necessary to catch possible signals, and we have a pervasive system of prevention, and which aims at preventing criminals, organized crime in public tenders, for example. And we will have some reports during this conference. We have reports and papers showing the collaboration between public and private stakeholders, individuals. Our country, in the field of public administrations, has developed some kind of antibodies. That is, it has prepared some tools to identify danger. There is the anti-corruption system, and there are some practices that have been implemented within the public system. There is also a pervasive and very impactful system which aims at maintaining integrity mechanisms for election tenures of electoral offices, because in our legal system we have a system to prevent infiltration into the public administration that may lead also to dissolving the bodies that have been elected. And these are mechanisms that we want to maintain, and that because they are well established. So corruption and money laundering are closely linked, closely related. They are two sides of the same coin, probably. Thank you, Minister Piantedosi. Now, Carlo Nordio, he's a justice, public prosecutor. Now, he's a Minister of Justice. What is corruption? Well, first of all, let me thank Minister Tajani for the kind invitation. Thank you all for your attention. Well, actually, as Dr. Vespa said, for 40 years I was a public prosecutor at the prosecuting office, public prosecutor's office in Venice. And in 1994, I conducted the investigation on the so-called Tangentopoli Venetia region, which, and we have identified 25 episodes of corruption. Then I closed my career with MOSE, coordinated investigation on MOSE, which was the greatest event, corruption event in national corruption event. And we actually realized that there were resources that were wasted, and some of the resources devoted to corruption amounted to around €1 billion, which is a huge amount of money. So in the meanwhile, over the past 25 years, several anti-corruption laws were enacted, and there were more penalties, but they were not useful. And I came to the conclusion that it's useless to intimidate corrupt limited the corruption potential, because this will not be scared by the severity of penalties or the number of penalties, because they will find a way out and they will never be persecuted. But what is important to do is not so much to scare the corruption potential, but they have to be disarmed. They have to be deprived of the weapons that will lead to corruption. Which are the weapons? Which the weapons paradoxically are the laws, because we have in Italy, we have laws production enactment, which is 10 times the European average. And actually, our realization of corruption in Italy is 10 times higher than the European average. And this confirms what Tacitus was saying, corruptissima repubblica plurima legis. That is, the more the republic is corrupted and the more laws it will enact, because to fight corruption, the more the laws, the more it will be corrupted, because the more laws we have, the more acts of parliament we have, the more the confusion to identify competencies and procedures. So if you have to knock on 100 doors using 100 laws to get provision to get something, they will find one of these doors closed until someone someone will knock on the door, but will give a bribe to open the door, to have the door being opened. So we must have swift and radical legislation. We have to reduce the number of laws. We have to identify competencies. We have to simplify procedures. That is, we must allow citizens to be able to knock just one door, knowing whom they are interacting with, and they should rely on few clear laws. In this case, the potential corruptor will be disarmed, because if that provision is not enacted in the right time and in the right terms, we know exactly who the culprit will be and which procedures have been breached. So increasing the severity and the number of penalty does not help, because the potential corruptor must not be scared, but must be disarmed. Thank you very much, Minister Nordio. Minister Tajani, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the message of Falcone Borsellino. How do you think you will honor it? Well, first of all, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for accepting the invitation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation to discuss a very topical issue all over the world. The new Italian government intends to act firmly, and here the presence of Minister of Interior, Minister of Justice show that we want to work synergistically with the other ministries. The strength of the government is exactly this. That is, having the same aim in pursuing the most important objectives. So the first thing to be done in Italy and all over the world is to speak, and Borsellino was saying that, is to speak about corruption. We have to talk about corruption, but in a positive connotation. That is, we should talk about honesty. I think that in every family, we should start explaining our children that they have to be honest people, because the cultural background is not secondary. That is, education, we are not speaking of cultural education only, because school and universities must train new generation and educate new generations. And I think that the first characteristic of a person must be honesty. So it's a cultural battle. It's It's a battle that we have to fight, and which is parallel to the one that is indicated by Carlo Nordio. That is bureaucracy, red taping. There are so many laws, so much bureaucracy. If we can reduce bureaucracy, so if we can reduce the number of laws and we reduce the number of bureaucracies, number of stamps and permits required, means that the corruptor and the corrupted will not be able to act, to take any actions. When European Union, and we are amongst the founding members of European Union, so this is something that we act on a European level. We ask the countries that want to become EU members, we want them to have mechanisms against corruption, so that our community, which of course must be enlarged, I'm thinking of the candidate countries in the Balkans.
Un simbolo.
Fight against corruption is the symbol of European Union that we are members of and that we believe in. But, Director, we work very hard, even through the structures that Ambassador Segui was recalling, that is the facilities and agencies within this ministry. There are judges, people from the Guardia di Finanza, financial police, that are obviously working and fighting in all sectors. But in every Italian embassy in the world, there are representatives from the police and also representatives from the Ministry of Justice, that is magistrates and justices, working with our embassy to fight against corruption together with the country, with the host country. And we bring our best practices, we bring our expertise and experience. We have an economic and financial police, which is quite unique and which is independent, which other countries are often jealous of, in inverted commas. This is our know-how in the fight against corruption. This know-how, our know-how may be useful for other countries. In the next G7, I would like to start a working group to fight against corruption so that on an international level we can work together, because there will be an attempt to corrupt different countries when for example, when there are public tenders with EU funds, and in many countries, so for example, there are EU funds made available for growth, but there is corruption there which divert the use of EU funds that are aimed at making that country grow, and that are used instead to purchase weapons to support dictators. And certainly this is not what we are looking for in our policy. But obviously we have to work hand in hand in this, because corruption is borderless. And organized crime in Italy is linked with organized crime elsewhere. Minister Piantedosi can make hundreds of examples. And in this maleficent alliance, we have to pay attention to corruption, the large tenders associated with PNR, that is the offspring of recovery plan. We don't want any corruption there, so that there will be illegal proceedings for those who do not have the interest of fostering growth and development. But it's like fight against climate change. We can't do that if some countries go on not abiding by the rules and we abide by the rules. So we have to fight against corruption on an international level. We need cooperation more and more, Europol, Eurojust, and this can be done with, for example, in Latin America. I was speaking with the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Guatemala. There is, we can do more, and also when it comes to human being trafficking, in that case too, there is corruption. So it's a fight, 360 degrees fight against corruption. And we are fully involved at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And obviously the police and Carabinieri are strongly committed and are present in our embassy. So I think that through a G7 that starts an anti-corruption working group will be able to positively answer the question of Falcone and Borsellino. Okay, thank you, Minister Tajani. And I would like to give just 2 minutes presentation with Minister Piantedosi. Coordination between forces, this is very important. Since mafia and corruption go where the money is, so they have geographic limitations with 250 billion euro. It might be bonanza for them. Yes, coordination between forces.
Concezione interistituzionale.
Yeah, and coordination between the police forces, as Minister Tajani, Minister Nordio said, we have an institutional architecture in our country that shows the this interforce specialization. We have, of course, every police force or law enforcement force has its expertise and is specialized and in a coordinated way helps to fight corruption, identify and fight corruption. So yes, this institutional interdependency is very important. And obviously, we have to think of international cooperation given the fact that corruption is all over the world. And now I would like to refer to something that you said in the introduction. Italy is seen, well, in the ranking of fight against corruption. You mentioned you mentioned the positive news about the place of Italy in this ranking, and but I must say that Italy in these rankings has always appeared as a country with much corruption, but everything was based on sentiment and Transparency International, on behalf of the European Commission, conducted this survey. So European citizens were asked, how do you feel corruption in your country? So there are sentiments. Well, it's a survey, but it's based on sentiment. It's based on citizens' feelings, obviously, and because citizens' feelings on security are very important. But a recent OECD working group actually on corruption has praised the activity of Italy, what Italy did, and pointing to the law enforcement, pointing to the efficacy of our law enforcement for the courage by which it pursued and continued to pursue the action against corruption, and it praised the national practice of interinstitutional national table on international corruption. That is, practically in this way, all agencies and all stakeholders can be involved. And I would like to close, and I refer to what Minister Tajani has just said. I recently attended the G7 meeting in Wiesbaden, and I can tell you that Italy Italy raised the topic of corruption as one of the issues to be discussed, and what the results of that meeting certainly acknowledge that effort. Okay, Minister Nordio suggested or recommended some solutions, not so many laws, just one door, and of course it's easy. It must be easy to identify the door for the citizen, the door to knock on. So how do you think you will do that? So what will be the path to get to that point? Well, first of all, we have to identify a number of useless and dangerous laws. We will try to repeal them or review them completely. And it's about substantive law, criminal law, procedural law, and all the administrative regulations that overlapped over the decades that are contradict each other. One of the paradoxes of our system, that is the integrated system, is that we have a number of laws and provisions that are contradictory. So if you abide by one, you will breach another one, you violate another one that the lawmaker was not aware of. And this applies particularly to tax law. And if I have one more minute, I would like to say something. Crime of corruption is in shadow because the money is not paid through bank transfer, and it happens without witnesses. So it occurs between two people, the corruptor who pays and the corrupted who receives the money. Both of them can be punished for this crime of corruption. So both of them have an interest to keep silent because they have that faculty. They may not answer the justice. We should instead change the situation. We should have someone, the one who has paid should be encouraged to speak, having impunity. And but while in the past there were some crimes where envisaged instead that would not allow this situation to occur. So we should break this vicious cycle between corruptor and corrupted, because otherwise we never have evidence of that corruption. Well, clean hands or money police is certainly part of that. Well, obviously it cannot be preventive custody or preventive arrest or threat of jail, because otherwise this would be like barbarian measure. Okay, Minister Tajani, initiatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What are the initiatives from your ministry? Well, we are working already because there is an anti-corruption agency that is a justice supported by Guardia di Finanza. In this ministry, we have 80-90 people from the Guardia di Finanza working in this respect. There are also Carabinieri, but in the embassies also there is a close collaboration and we had results in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we want to extend that to Asia and Africa, because we want to provide our know-how and make other countries benefit from it. So we want to strengthen our action in this respect. We will work hand in hand with OECD, because it asks us to have international cooperation. I would like to thank Secretary General Corman for his words to appreciate the work of Italy in the fight against corruption. So we want to strengthen the rule of law, of course, and within the framework of European policy, because fight against corruption can be enforced with if you have the same aims, if you set the same rules, if you knock down the same bureaucratic walls, because I totally agree with Nordio. There are too many laws, too much bureaucracy, and that's why we need to make reforms by having authorization, prior authorization, and so on and so forth. So the more or the barriers, the more corruption we have. We've seen that with other countries, and other countries too are trying to remove these barriers because in the maze of a ministry or the office, there are corruptors and corrupted. The rule must be the same, and it must be used on an international level. This is our effort. So we will bring the experience of Falcone and Borsellino and their values and disseminating them all over the world, making them available to our to other countries, Asia and Africa are continents where we would like to work with and benefit from the expertise of our experts. Thank you very much, Antonio Tajani, Matteo Piantedosi, and Carlo Nordio. And before we have the coffee break, Minister Tajani was mentioning the contribution of OECD Secretary General Matthias Cormann. Let's see there.
Tajani, Commissioner Johansson, Ministers Piantedosi and Nordio, ambassadors, friends all. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you during this meeting on International Anti-Corruption Day. Corruption inflicts considerable economic and societal damage. It undermines fairness and transparency in government decision-making. It worsens inequality, penalizing the poorest and most vulnerable. And it discourages investment and reduces productivity. Perhaps most fundamentally, it undermines citizens' trust in government at a time when it is already under serious pressure. A recent OECD survey across 22 countries found that on average, 4 in 10 respondents say they trust their national government, with wide variation across countries. Citizens' perceptions of public sector integrity are a particular challenge. Over 1/3 of respondents in our survey believe it is likely that a public employee would accept a bribe. The OECD, with Italy's support, is working to address these risks and these perceptions. We are contributing to international efforts to combat corruption and to promote integrity in 2 important complementary areas. First, we are leading the fight against transnational bribery and other forms of unfair competition. The Convention on Combating Bribery of Foreign Public Officials in International Business Transactions, which entered into force in 1999, is the only international anti-corruption instrument focused on the supply side of bribery. The Convention establishes legally binding obligations on state parties to criminalize foreign bribery. The newly adopted 2021 recommendation for further combating bribery of foreign public officials in international business transactions, to which Italy contributed, further strengthens Convention members' ability to fight foreign bribery. It contains strengthened measures on enforcement, addressing the demand side of foreign bribery and incentivizing companies' compliance, among other updates. As a long-standing party to the Convention, Italy has made significant progress towards implementing the Convention and related instruments. In October 2022, Italy underwent an evaluation by the Working Group on Bribery. The Working Group welcomed Italy's strengthened legislation, its increased pace of enforcement, its commitment to modernizing its judiciary, and its efforts to strengthen international and intra-agency cooperation to fight foreign bribery. Of course, more work lies ahead. The Working Group made a range of recommendations, including improving whistleblower protection in the public and private sectors and addressing a high dismissal rate in foreign bribery cases. A second area, the OECD provides governments with tools to strengthen public integrity. Integrity safeguards ensure public sector efficiency and fairness, and they improve private sector productivity and dynamism. They can also reduce the risk of foreign interference in democracies, as foreign actors can take advantage of loopholes in political financing frameworks to affect the democratic process. Just last month, ministers from OECD member countries, as well as some OECD accession countries, committed to urgently reinforce democracies. Italy is a key partner in this work, and we were delighted that Minister Zangrillo was able to join us for these discussions. The OECD recommendations on public integrity, on lobbying, and on conflict of interest provide some of the only internationally agreed standards on public integrity. We need to build on this further and continue to improve trust. Your efforts to fight corruption and promote public integrity are real contributions to Italy's economic and democratic well-being and to global efforts to tackle international corruption. Thank you.
È ora prevista una pausa dei lavori.
Now we are having a break for 15 minutes, and we will resume our work in 15 minutes from now. Thank you.
per il supporto all'organizzazione. Vogliamo invitare le persone a riprendere posto? Per cortesia, possiamo prendere posto?
Can you please take your seats? Please take your seats. We would like to resume our proceedings.
Riprendiamo posto per permettere la ripresa dei lavori.
Can you take your seats, please?
Un minuto e riprendiamo.
We will resume in 1 minute.
Allora, se facciamo un attimo di silenzio, possiamo
We can resume our proceedings. Dottoressa Rondinelli, please, you have the floor.
Eccoci,
Here we are. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back. We are ready to start the second session, second panel. Well, actually, there are many insights. There were many insights from the first panel, from the first session, and these inputs, of course, come from the Italian presidency of G20 in terms of corruption, fight against corruption 2021. Okay, so there are some themes that we heard in the previous panel and that we will try to develop in this session. The first topic is the Italian anti-corruption system is sound and valid, and it's a good, it may be used as an international model, and something that we will try to talk about in this session with all police forces and public prosecutor Melillo is that we are at the moment dealing with PNR. So we will try to recover, and there is maximum attention to that. And the other issue is the need for cooperation between all the stakeholders, including from police forces. I would like to start with Lamberto Giannini, Chief of Police. I would like to ask you, in Italy, there is perception, much perception of corruption. To what extent is this awareness perceived in your activity, and how much does your activity on an international level may increase the awareness on this topic? Well, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Well, certainly, there is awareness, there is attention to this phenomenon. Beforehand, some figures have been provided, and we know that now in the ranking we are at a place, or we're placed at 42. So over the past few years, we have actually gained 10 places, so to say. And I can guarantee that as the Chief of State Police, we really pay much attention to this phenomenon. We certainly realize that there is a discrepancy between the statistical data coming from reports, then the Crime Commission data, and what actually happens, because I must say that data are quite reassuring. The data available to us are quite reassuring. Just from a statistical viewpoint, in a sample of 100,000 people, 100,000 inhabitants, 1.94 corruption activities. We have 1.94, but if we consider crimes against public administration, such as embezzlement and others, it's 10 episodes in 100,000 inhabitants. Of course, this does not mean that we do not have to pay attention to that, because, of course, it's very important that for the corruptor and the corrupted that try to keep silent. So what is important is to investigate and actually identify the act of corruption. How can we do that? By by looking at some like signaling crimes, monitoring sudden enrichment and some people making money suddenly, and we have to pay attention to context and public tenders, and we have to strengthen the coordination between police forces, but also between institutions. Then as regards international activity or the international scenario, certainly our Falcone and Borsellino, our justices from Sicily, told us to follow the money. And now that there is globalization, the world is interconnected, and it's easy through the web to make money and to place or move money through the web. I think that it's extremely important to have international cooperation. International cooperation through dedicated ad hoc programs. We cooperate with a program that is named after Falcone and Borsellino, and in agreement with the Ministry of of the Interior and Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are working with Caribbean countries, Asian countries. We have some activities with Colombia, so Latin America. Why is that important? Because the more awareness at the international level, the more awareness of the importance of this phenomena, of these activities, of how these crimes can be taken advantage of by organized crime to pollute legal economy. The more awareness, the more it will be the easier it will be to fight against them, and fight against them on a global viewpoint in close cooperation with other countries, because this will be the only way through which we will follow the money from the money laundering, which fed by corruption.
Comandante Luzzi.
Commander Luzzi.
Allora, il comandante...
Okay, Chief of Police Giannini saying that we have reassuring data. We said, and we repeated, that the perception of the corruption system, the perception is that this is a sound system. And so how much awareness is there on this topic as compared to what you do on in your everyday activity? Yes, good morning, everyone, and I will follow up with Prefect Giannini. I follow up with him because amongst the different themes that we share with combined police forces, that is state police and Guardia di Finanza, we have the same vision on this topic. So starting from the perception or the awareness of corruption in Italy, our Minister of the Interior spoke of a sentiment. Yes, certainly this corruption does exist, but it cannot be completely eradicated. But now that we are ranked around 40, according to the international statistics, I think we don't deserve that. We should be higher in the ranking in terms of rule of law, in terms of legality. And so this is something that we analyze, we take action, and we take practical actions. As far as the Carabinieri, Arma di Carabinieri is concerned, I would like to underline three aspects. We are a public administration, so in order to be credible, we must be the first to demonstrate that we take distance from this phenomenon. And And we do that through some internal procedures. Some are shared with other public administrations with 3-year plan against corruption. We do this through training because we have to make people aware of what happens when committing the corruption crime. Sometimes military men may underrate it. And then we have other measures that other administrations do not have that facilitate this type of control. So that is so that we can be credible as Carabinieri courts. Obviously, without credibility, we cannot work. Obviously, we have to take preventative and law enforcement measures as it happens. In our case, preventative we have to take out preventative action with cooperation protocols with other agencies which are interested in corruption. ANAC, first of all, and AAC, which is interested in this fight against corruption, but also Confindustria, Coldiretti, all the other agencies, because legality starts from sharing a broader vision. If we can establish a relationship of confidence with entrepreneurs, we can reduce the risk of many phenomena, including corruption, the risk of corruption. Then there is the law enforcement, so intervening. Our intervention, our people are trained. There is easy investigational, technical investigational institute delivering specific courses are investigating techniques because, of course, some psychology, because trainees have to be educated also on psychology. If, for example, if there is a tender which involves only few companies or enterprises, we should suspect something. This is not a crime per se, or a civil servant who suddenly becomes rich. And this has to be connected with other indicators which will help the investigation. So we organize these courses for our staff, and we do that in collaboration with ANAC, or we have other police or foreign police forces. I see Ambassador San Marino, and she attends our courses. Training courses. This is an example of cooperation. As regards specific crimes which fall within European, the competence of European prosecutor. Well, there are EU, EUPO. There are crimes which fall within the Italian jurisdiction, but there are Italian justices taking care of that, and of course there are carabinieri specialized in that. So our court, our agency, our carabinieri try to meet all possible needs. And I would like to close with a last remark. There is a theme that goes beyond Italy, that is international cooperation through Department of Public Security, which depends on Prefect Giannini. Obviously, our court contributes from different in different ways, in different respects. We contribute with security experts so that Italy can have an international network to work and to take its activities beyond national borders. I must say, I'm proud of this. And Italy has many problems, but we tend to underestimate us. We tend to underrate our work. And I think that in many sectors, not only ours, but other sectors too, I think that in terms of techniques, skills, expertise, we can bring our investigational culture to other countries. So we we spread our know-how, and I must say that we have sown the seed, and this plant is now growing at a European level because our ARMA contributed to international cooperation. I'm very proud of this because what we have learned, unfortunately, to the detriment of our policemen or magistrates or justices killed by the organized crime, what we have learned allowed us to grow, to reorganize, and to bring our investigational culture to make it available to other countries. General, you mentioned some of the actors of the next or the stakeholders of the next panel, OECD and Confindustria, because then we will talk about cooperation between all of this. And now let me ask Giuseppe Zaffarana, Lieutenant General of Guardia di Finanza. Corruption is taking advantage of some tools which are spread all over the national territory. Correct me if I'm wrong. First of all, you have the special operating unit against corruption. So I would like to know, can you tell me about this activity and how has that evolved over the years?
Well, let's say that in 2001, there has been a deep evolution in the Guardia di Finanza, in the tax police, because we took over our present task of police, economic and financial police, and therefore we developed an entire new organization to cover the three tasks of our corps, i.e. the revenues, public spending, and so budget expenses, and the protection of capital markets and goods and services markets. I mean, I said that because these areas and these tasks are connected with one another. And I come to the issue of corruption because often the fiscal tool is used to create the provision to pay for bribes or to cover the cost, connected to a bribe. For instance, a business that uses a fake invoice for this reason. And then public spending is a sector that by its nature is connected with the corruption, because public spending could mean public tenders and therefore corruption phenomena connected to it. And the same is worth for the protection of capitals. And I'm thinking of recycling that sees the illicit profits coming from corruption that are reinvested. Well, I said all that just to say that our corps has developed its own organizational structure starting from the specific year I mentioned to cover all these three tasks, and also from the point of view of the most effective contrast of anti-corruption. And I come to what you were saying earlier. We have an organization that is focused on special corps, and in particular on the anti-corruption special corps, which is the main interlocutor of ANAC, the National Anti-Corruption Authority, and that develops information set of analysis and information that aim at detecting possible corruption phenomena on the national territory. And so the physical people that, for a series of reasons, can be involved in corruption aspects. Now, these analyses of risk analysis are then translated into qualified inputs that are conveyed to the unions on the territory who have economic control of the territory and anti-mafia activities and anti-money laundering activities. And then they start some activities under the lead of the judicial authority. So the special anti-corruption unit is also the basis of all that. And then we have the organization at local level. We have our groups at local level, and we have the economic financial departments that are in every provincial, in every region and in every province. And these are the units that represents the best of the best in our corps. And under the lead of the judicial activity, judicial authorities develop the investigations as judicial police in the anti-corruption sector. These are investigations of a technical nature, or financial nature, or patrimonial nature. And then all that is further developed by the contributions that come from other elements at international level for judicial and police activities under the collaboration of other police forces. And this material is further enriched by the contribution of our economic and financial experts that are present in 28 embassies, and they, by law, they deal with economic and financial crimes at international level, and they can provide a significant contribution in the development of investigation activities. Just to give you a few data on what the Guardia di Finanza has done in the last 2 years. Well, in the last 2 years, we arrested 750 people for this type of crimes, and we have discovered illicit behaviors for 350 million euros, and we have seized 160 million euros of goods from corrupted people. I hope I have given you a complete answer. Yes, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Melillo, Prosecutor Melillo, I go back to the video dedicated to Falcone and Borsellino, by which we started this day. They are examples of fight against mafia that are known everywhere in the world. But mafia is evolving, is adjusting, and is infiltrating more and more in the economic tissue. And so what can we do to combat a phenomenon that is continuously evolving? Well, yes, you said right thing when you said they are two pioneers in the fight against mafia. Giovanni Falcone said that the mafia people will always be ahead of us, and it's very simple to say a very complex thing, which means that mafias and organized crime continuously insert in the society and in the markets their knowledge of modernity, knowledge of technologies, and this is contributing to explaining the fastness of the transformation of these criminal organizations. They are transforming very fast, and the idea that mafias are the reflex of poor society doesn't explain anything. You know, mafias are a very powerful factor that is feeding the financial market and the business market. So it is clear that the very notion of infiltration doesn't explain the phenomenon and the reality of the phenomenon, that see sort of interaction among the most sophisticated components of the criminal organizations and the management of important segments in the judicial system. Mafias today talking the same language that is highly practiced by the market in the market, you know, corruption and fiscal fraud. These are the ways in which they speak, you know, the language of criminal organizations, and this is the profile of dangerousness on which all investigations activities must focus. There is another factor, a further factor of complexity that is connected to globalization, most of all, because today the large criminal networks have a huge logistic network available. They have a parallel system of exchange that eliminate the risk of transborder transfer of money. And then there is another risk, most of all, a risk that is directly connected to the ability of criminal organizations to have an impact on the political destabilization processes that are underway in significant parts of countries near us, bordering our country. And so from this point of view, it is clear that conflicts and war economies are a further element of expansion for the organized crime. And it suffices to think of the expansion of criminal networks that has followed the conflict in former Yugoslavia to give a concrete amount of a concrete measure of the risk. And then the Kosovo conflict is another devastating element, and therefore now as then criminal organizations will propose themselves as mediators in the traffics of weapons, technologies, and this is a further risk that is defining new and worrisome scenarios in combating organized crime. And then if there is a way of defining organized crime, perhaps the best one is the one that puts together violence and factors of transformation of the criminal power into richness. And by this transformation, corruption has a pivotal role in this transformation. Apart from being the tool of the obsession of the mafia groups, that is their security, there is no investigation that doesn't show their willingness in safeguarding their expectations of freedom and non-convictability. Prefect Giannini, you mentioned awareness and the need of knowing the dimension, the new dimension of the corruption offense. But in the previous panel, we mentioned that already. But in your opinion, collaboration among police forces is therefore helping to reach some objectives and to increase this awareness. Well, collaboration, coordination, that is then the model that in the past 40 years we have received by Law 121, coordination among the various police forces. Well, this is a very important factor. And it is an important factor that we interpret every day with our colleagues and our friends present here in the room coming from the other police forces. This is not only a way of exchanging data, but through the creation of ad hoc working groups and observatories, for instance, inside the criminal police, the exchange of experiences that allows us to face the problem better. And we do it on all the issues that have a huge interest to us. I mean, the first need, in my opinion, is to understand a phenomenon in the light of the present situation, because the phenomenon of corruption is connected to the time, to the present time and situations. We now are going through what has occurred during the pandemic. We talk together because organized crime and corruptors had to face this phenomenon, and we found out that there was a sort of support, an attempt of loyalty that has been done with several people who were undergoing difficulties, and then these people were then under such huge pressures that they had to give up their companies, and they were victims of usury. And then in a subsequent phase, when there is a recovery, and so there is the distribution of the money from the PNRR, they have to look for strategies to get in the field, in the flow of money. And this is our attention, our effort to combat this phenomenon. We are doing that together in Italy and abroad. And we have specific training schools in which everyone makes available its specific, his or her specific abilities with specific focus on these investigation techniques. I'm talking about the School for the Police Forces, which is a prestigious force, and the Prevention School for Criminality located in Caserta, where we host very often, we host colleagues from other countries. And the fact of discussing with colleagues from other countries is an added value that is very important. First of all, because in this way we have a full awareness of the phenomenon at global level, and then because we set up those contacts of also personal nature that then allow to solve issues easily or in an easier way. So there is a common effort by all of us to select the best investigators, for what we are concerned within the central anti-crime organization. We have dedicated units dedicated to the fight against corruption. But then these colleagues must be put in a situation of exchanging experiences and be put in contact with investigators from other countries. And we do that with quite articulated programs and with some tutoring, work. And this is giving us very important results because it accelerates the collaboration, cooperation, and it makes it possible for us to be put in a condition of following the advantage that Judge Falcone mentioned, and that unfortunately is something that is committing us a lot. General Luzzi, going back to the idea of this working together between corruption and criminality, you've been in Palermo for 5 years, from 2007 to 2012, and you have developed a huge experience in the fight against mafia crime. We all recall the Perseo operation. 150 people were put in jail, people connected to Cosa Nostra. And it was an operation mentioned by all national and international papers. As Prosecutor Melillo said, mafia is evolving, but what are you now doing to counteract this phenomenon with the European Procurator's Office also? Oh yes, you're right, mafias in the plural, they change, but the danger remains the same. And what do I mean by that? It is clear that up to the 90s, mafia was violent in its manifestations in the most organized part of mafia. I just remember the magistrates that were killed and all the killings in Rome. So the mafia was under everyone's eyes. Now it's working in a more silent way, and it's underestimated, I would say. So as everything that is not making noise, it goes unnoticed sometimes. So I said it is dangerous, mafia, because in the end, as Melillo said, it touches some aspects that have an economic and financial nature. And these are aspects that have an impact on free competition, on the solidarity of the country, solidarity of a country, and therefore it puts in danger the interests of democracy and the interests of future generations. And then in the end, the criminal phenomena ruin the future of our young people because they give them no prospects we in the Carabinieri, we have a special structure, which is the ROS, and deals with terrorism, but also organized crime, and organized crime in mafias and their components, the different organizations. And so we do that at national level from Lombardy to Sicily. It's not that in the north of Italy we don't have mafias. Since in the north of Italy we have more money that circulates, mafias are present on the territory, and they make their own business there, so they are quite dangerous also there. So we have investigation elements from the north to the south of Italy that under the lead of the magistracy and the coordination of Prosecutor Melillo, which is the national anti-mafia prosecutor, we carry out investigations. We've been doing that for decades now. Now we have important investigations underway, which will bring results in a few days or years. So we are in the forefront in this huge fight on the huge issues of organized crime. But there is another element that must not be underestimated, i.e. their presence on the territory. And I mentioned this just to give you an idea of all the stations of the Carabinieri force, 4,600 stations. And then the forest Carabinieri also are present in a very localized way, because this is very important, because the corruption phenomenon or the distrust in the institutions is what requires a control of the territory and intercepting forms of stress on the public administration of different nature, or corruption phenomena that are very small, but then if they increase, they could be highly dangerous. For instance, the healthcare system is not without corruption phenomena for public contests or fake COVID certification under the payment of a sum. So I just give you some trivial examples of corruption phenomenon. And then we have the greenwashing also, all the certifications connected to European contributions that create corruption phenomena in where the public administration has no sense of legality that it should have, and the same is worth for other sectors in which the Carabinieri are highly specialized. So the control of the territory means fostering a general situation of legality and the development of investigations at a higher level. Now, I conclude by saying that there are also information activities that go beyond the judicial part. What Minister Piantedosi mentioned before is a container where there are several things, and starts from the information activities carried out by the police forces in a coordinated way. And it is an activity that has no judicial value, but has a value of barrier for some aspects vis-à-vis of the organized crime and some forms of corruption. So there is an entire world behind that, which is quite complex. And I conclude by a concept that I believe is of fundamental importance. The Italian system, or the international system, must be unitarian, united. I mean, the question asked by Mrs. Rondinelli to the chief of police on the coordination of police forces. Coordination is a multiplier of efficiency in police forces, but coordination today is a concrete, useful, and pragmatic coordination. And this coordination that is very, very important must put together with all the other public systems. You mentioned ANAC, but I would say also with all the rest of the public, of what the public represents in terms of barrier against corruption phenomena and organized crime. And this is a bit more difficult for Italy we are not able to make to organize a system. We are very good in investigation techniques, but when we have to put our efforts together, we have our cultural difficulties that are rooted in 2,000 years of history. But this must be a very important element and must be a must. You know, we have to do it at international level, as many others before me just mentioned, because in this way we can fight against the organized crime. But today, 'Ndrangheta, and I close with that, 'Ndrangheta as a global perspective. We find it in Germany, in South America, in Australia. But there is a difference. We are fully aware of that, but the South Americans do not have awareness of that. And in Germany, there is no awareness, not the right awareness of this phenomenon of organized crime. And then this phenomenon has its presence in the Reggio Calabria province, and it is not just a national phenomenon. It's become a global phenomenon now. And so this phenomenon must be tackled at global level. And there I conclude, because I do not want to take much of your time. Italy has focused on this problem and has become the leading partner in a coordination and collaboration system and an inter-exchange system among the various police forces of many countries that are interested in that. This is an idea carried out by the Ministry of Interior, and it's giving important results in terms of collaboration. The same is done by the judicial authorities in full respect of countries where every country has its own regulation. So I conclude by saying the message is prevention, repression, and work together in a system. Thank you, General. Prosecutor Melillo, I come to you with a concept that I met many times when studying some documents before coming here to this day, which is the concept of liquid mafia, with its power and its ability of penetration. And this is based upon the weakness of society. So the mafias can penetrate where the tissue, the social tissue, is weaker. And so what can we do?
Out of mic.
Dicevo, le mafie sono costellazioni di impresa.
Well, mafias are a constellation of businesses which are not different from normal businesses. They have the same accounting systems, they have the same tax systems, tax technique systems, but the advantage is that they can rely on endless financial resources coming from illegal activities, and on the other end, they can intimidate. They have this strength of intimidation that comes from the criminal organizations. So these criminal organizations have higher influence on markets, which is completely different, and a higher influence than the entrepreneurs, because normal entrepreneurs, because all those that are in a partnership with organized crime are conditioned and influenced by the logics and the approach of organized crime. Mafia, 'Ndrangheta, Camorra represent the pivot of false billing and VAT frauds. So these are they are behind them, and these are criminal plans that are perpetrated on an international level. So we have to acknowledge that mafias are not a problem in southern Italy or Italy per se, but it's a European issue. It's an issue that involves the whole international community. And of course, there is no alternative to the formula that was indicated some years ago, that is, there is a need for solidary sovereignty and not lonely sovereignty. But there is also a problem of harmonization of legislation because organized crime takes advantage of legislation asymmetries, the different monitoring procedures and law enforcement systems within the different countries. So it is urgent and it is important to complete the Palermo's Convention review, the Convention on Transnational Crime, and the signatory parties to the Convention of Palermo adopted a resolution, and we called it Falcone Resolution, that commits the state, engages the state to continue on the way of harmonization and to harmonize their activities on some illegal activities and of course cooperation also on evidence that is formed in cyberspace. This is a goal that it's not an abstract goal, but it's something that should be taken home. It's a take-home message that we should pay attention to.
Comandante Zaffarana, diamo qualche...
Commander Zaffarana, yeah, maybe you may provide us with numbers that might be useful for other colleagues. Since January 2020 until today, people who were reported for several crimes were 6,200 and 750 arrested, 160 million euros seized, assets seized. So it was a capillary action on the national territory, but you're also active on the international level. So can you provide us with some figures on this in this respect?
Ecco qua. Sì,
Yes, Guardia di Finanza is working at the international level because we deal with financial and economic aspects, issues. So, of course, with globalization, there are no physical borders to financial transactions. And this is the reason why our core organized to set up a network in the world which involves 28 key points represented by the most important Italian embassies abroad, together with, and it works with UN, OECD, and the International Customs Agency. And obviously, it's important that these subjects provide contributions, and therefore they work hand in hand with experts and security experts who are working for Ministry of the Interior, under the aegis of which we work in this respect. And it's very important. This international cooperation is very important, and the Economic and Financial Police Corps is our institution that it's an agency that aims at updating and training our people, but which has an international approach. Just consider that in the past 3 years, despite COVID, we provided training, corruption training courses for 86 countries in the world. So this is the venue for OECD in terms of crime, and it developed great expertise in this respect, training and specialization of of our staff is the key strength. We work together with judicial police, tax police, and so on and so forth. And obviously, there is the operating approach that we use, which is developed across the different sectors, and which does not, which always has an international approach. So we, of course, we take advantage of all these points, of all these assets in our international action, and this allows our investigations to be completed and up to the moment of not only of arresting, obviously, the criminals, but its aim is to identify and seize and confiscate the goods which and assets abroad. So this means that we nullify the criminal conduct. This has, of course, has great impact on these activities.
Grazie. Allora,
thank you very much. We will have a last round of the table. Can you please take your time to 2 minutes so that I will give you, I will ask one question each. Dr. Giannini, you are here as Chief of Police and Director General Public Security. As Chief of Police, can you tell us about some initiatives that the police is working on in terms of anti-corruption, fight against corruption? What I would like to tell you is, rather, I would like to reassure you that we are fully committed on different fronts. First of all, international front, for example, in terms of law enforcement, with Interpol, we prompted with the other countries in the introduction of a silver notice to follow the assets of organized crime to make seizures abroad. And then we strengthen our specialized units, as I said before, within the central operating unit and within the mobile squads. And then, last but not least, very important activity, training of training our staff, and as to the knowledge, educating them, letting them know, making them, instructing them about the laws and law enforcement, and external activities, that is approaching principles of legality, rule of law, and this is something that we have started also at schools, because it's very important to make students aware of these issues. It's very important to make people aware that they are entitled to justice, and to know which are the police forces that should address too. And this represents our greatest investment. This is done for young people, so our greatest investment is represented in investment in young people joining police, but also young people who are who build the future society. Thank you, Prefect Giannini. General Luzzi, PNRR, a moment of recovery, very important recovery for Italy. So there is alert from all police forces. What is the Carabinieri Court doing? Well, 235 billion, provided this is so. Anyway, all this, this is, of course, honey for flies. obviously, it's attracting criminals. Obviously, we got organized according to the instructions given by the ministers in healthcare, where there will be healthcare will have 30 billion being allocated, then culture and education and environment. Environment will get a large share of this money. So we set up teams to verify and check all the activities and the procedures, and when we hope that. Of course, then all the budgets will be established for the different ministries. So we will work in this respect on the whole Italian territory. Whenever, obviously, there are crimes, then the public prosecutor's office will intervene. I would like to close my speech with a message of optimism, because we are all sorry, but I'm optimistic based on the following. First, Italy has law enforcement legislation. I think that it's one of the most advanced legislation on the international level, and also in terms of execution of penalties, because this enforcement of penalties, because of course this is the next step for those who are indicted of crimes, and there is also another reason to be optimistic, because today Italian police forces, Carabinieri as well, but I say that as a citizen, our police forces are healthy, they have ethical values that we don't find in other countries maybe. And so they are efficient, they can prevent and they can punish, and enforcing the laws of a democratic country. Obviously, we cannot cut the hand of a corrupted person. So within the legislation that we have in Italy, and overall the legislation is excellent, then police forces can implement these laws, can enforce these laws in an excellent way. And obviously we want to fight against all possible crimes, especially the crimes coming from organized crime, and crimes that have affect economic situation of citizens, that is corruption. Lucian Zaffarana within PNNR, Guardia di Finanza is working with ANAC on this topic. What are you doing? How are you working? Well, Guardia di Finanza is playing a central role in the staffing chart organized for PNRR, because our court is one of the referring agency, anti-fraud referring agencies, and in this respect, we have to make our know-how available, our expertise available to achieve through to organize tenders that cannot be that do not leave space for corruption, and we try to strengthen the cooperation and our links with European public prosecutor's office and with other Italian justices. And we do that increasing our judiciary police activities and strengthening the activity of investigation analysis of suspected operations, or we try to identify the actually owners of assets and goods, and also economic investigations as well. We have preventative and law enforcement activities which have been designed to make a valuable contribution for the right use of funds coming from PNRR. Now, the relationship with ANAC is of paramount importance because ANAC is the place where preventative measures have been designed, preventative measures for public administration to work as efficiently as possible. Okay, and now we close with Prosecutor Giovanni Melillo and transnationality of mafias and corruption. What is the role of the Anti-Mafia Prosecutor's Office? Well, first of all, our agency, the National Anti-Mafia and Counter-Terrorism Prosecutor, is, of course, is one of the stakeholders in this within the international cooperation and law enforcement, and it proved its usefulness because coordinating investigations, the coordination of investigations is a task which must be international, so not only national but international. Now the network we have cooperation and we set up a network. We have cooperation with other agencies, and thanks to this network we can achieve brilliant results. We are trying to strengthen, strengthening the investigating activities, starting from analysis of suspected financial operations, and in the past few days we have redefined the cooperation with Guardia di Finanza, and we will redefine also our cooperation with Financial Intelligence Unit in Italy. This is a tool that the lawmaker provided to us, and this is a tool that allows us to have information from other law enforcement systems. So to have information about money laundering. This is very useful also in fighting against corruption, and it is quite obvious then that the organized crimes mafia organizations are at the core of manufacturing processes, and they play a key role in cartels, and they are selected to operate and to work with the market, with public administrations, with politicians. So now we have new offices and new roles compared to the past, and obviously they are the target of our investigational efforts.
Allora, grazie.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to thank all the panelists, Lamberto Giannini, Commander Luzzi, Commander Zaffarana, Prosecutor Melillo, and to not leave because we will continue with the third panel. Thank you.
Vi invitiamo a mantenere i vostri posti perché siamo un po' in ritardo con il...
Please stay seated. Unfortunately, there will be no coffee break now, and we are lagging behind a little bit.
Stanno adesso i nostri. Invito a prendere posto così.
Please take your seats so that we can resume our proceedings.
Vi prego, prendiamo posto. Vi prego.
Le persone che stanno dietro forse dovrebbero passare.
Certamente. L'importante è che riempiamo il campo, Giovanni. Siamo pronti.
We are ready. We can resume our proceedings now.
Io direi di iniziare, dottor.
I think we can get started. Dottoressa Rondinelli, please. Yes, thank you, Dr. Tartaglia. Yeah, we can get started. Let's continue with this other panel. You see that there are some of the actors mentioned in the previous panels. So we continue to deal with the fight against corruption, and we will review it from different nuances or from different angles. I would like to start with Giuseppe Busia, who is the president of National Anti-Corruption Authority that was mentioned several times in ANAC. By previous speakers, ANAC has a recognized model, and I would like to start from a specific theme. That is, about 3 weeks ago, if I'm not wrong, there was the first European nucleus or unit, because there are rules for ANAC, which are valid also in the extra-European level. Maybe we should work on the European level. We need rules on the European level. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about these themes. Yes, what you said is absolutely true, because 3 weeks ago we had a meeting during which we started cooperation with colleagues of other European authorities, anti-corruption authorities, to have European rules. I'm happy to hear from Minister Tajani. I'm happy that that was mentioned by Minister Tajani. That is, usually in Italy we are prompting the establishment of European rules, and because we have a model that works in Italy, because we have seen that. And here I would like to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and last week we were in Ecuador to prevent the corruption prevention model in Italy, and which is considered as an example around the world. Unfortunately, sometimes we have the feeling that is not much appreciated by the Italians, and is not much appreciated in Italy, because prevention of corruption is a priority on a global level. U.S. President said this is a priority for national security of the USA, and it is at the international level. Taking it into account, investing in this is something that is a way to protect in national interest, and at the international level. But OECD, United Nations, Council of Europe representatives will say that. However, we can say that I can say that we should invest more in our own country to strengthen these elements. And as regards what was mentioned before several times, it's okay. In the past year, we were able to go up by 10 places in terms of Transparent International ranking. We work with them, and I would like to thank General Commanders of Generale Guardia di Finanza and Carabinieri. We work with them because corruption and fight against corruption is an activity that has to be done together with the other institutions. But I'm happy we gained 10 places, but we had to invest and do something more. This is not enough, and this is for our national interest. And we should, I think that the index of perception of corruption must be a global index, but we should create an index looking at objective measures, not only based on sentiment or perception. We are working on these objective measures, and we are developing them. And this is another model that we can export. We are trying to export. That is, the risk of corruption should be based on objective measures. We did that with some indicators which are associated with the context in which measuring is made, and associated specifically with some databases, that is public contracts, to see if tenders are always attended by the same subjects. That is, we want indicators that can make that are more reliable, because in countries where there is freedom of information, or in countries fighting against corruption, perception may be worse, because we talk about corruption, because one of the ways to fight it is to create awareness and talk about corruption. So we have to switch to objective indicators, objective measures, and I would invite you to visit this section in our website. Having objective measures means giving a realistic image of the country, and this, of course, affects attraction of investments, we are now exporting our models abroad. They look at our models. Let's try to follow the example. Let's learn to do that, how to do that in Europe and in Italy. In the most recent G20, this was one of the documents approved. So we have to implement it. We have to give a follow-up to it. This is an opportunity for our country, and this is an opportunity to be on the front end. Thank you, President Busia. Now, Bruno Corda, Director of the Agency for the Management of Seized and Confiscated Assets. Beforehand, we heard data about seized and confiscated assets. I would like to talk with you about a specific aspect, that is the social aspect, that is social use of these confiscated assets, which is a peculiarity of your agency. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the kind invitation, because it's an opportunity for us to talk about something that does not seem to be linked with fight against corruption, but it is. I would say that there is a social use of confiscated assets. Apart from the French systems, this is not paralleled by any other legal systems, because usually the assets are sold and there is no direct use. The strength of the Italian model lies in the fact that we are in a condition to return the asset to the territory that was the victim of the crime. On the other hand, we demonstrate loss of power of that subject that is deprived of those external objects, such as the car, the company, and so on and so forth. So something that has a great value. So this means that here there is very important. It's very important to teach this, teach young generations. So crime does not have a payoff or does not pay. So the state is stronger than the criminal. And this is what we want to teach young generations. And this is seen especially with companies, because we are the only agency managing companies that were confiscated to organized crime. Why is this important? For two reasons. One, first of all, because our goal is to reintroduce the company within the legal economy. And second goal is that we are strengthening managing of the labor market. That is, and these are two important elements, because the presence of a criminal in the economic tissue in the economic fabric will distort the market activities and will affect legal companies. And management of labor market, especially in a market with high unemployment rates, is certainly important. So trying to breach this system, so having the social use of seized and confiscated assets has a very important educational value and in the fight against corruption. Thank you, Director. And now the international stakeholders, so to say. We have two voices from OECD. I would like to start with Luca Sabatucci, who is the permanent representative of Italy to the OECD. And I would like to ask Luca Sabatucci, which is the national interest in the anti-bribery or anti-corruption fight of OECD. Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to welcome authorities, colleague ambassadors, General Director of Mondialization, Dr. Tartaglia, and all my colleagues from the same agency that I led for several years. Thank you very much. Thank you for your international premise, so to say. But actually, I will speak as a diplomat, not as some people in the trade. So I'm not an expert, but I will not talk about the very interesting technicalities that we've heard from previous speakers, but I will talk about how we can defend and protect Italian interest within large organizations, amongst which OECD. And when it comes to fight against corruption. And here I come to the birth of legal diplomacy. This is a new type of diplomacy. There have been others. Legal diplomacy is the one that probably best fits with this topic, so to say. So in order to do that, we have to take into account some key points. First of all, OECD's influence in the international economic scenario. You can think of economic forecast, how many billions can be moved in terms of investment and trade. Just think of the reports, the one against corruption, and Italy has advanced by 10 places, which means a lot in terms of confidence in one country in terms of investment. And amongst the many things that OECD does, we can define it as a super international rating agency. It's a public agency, so out of any suspicions and within OECD, Italy plays an important role. And in a country like Italy, just think of its international exposure. Think of the import-export weight, the impact on GDP. So this is something that should that make us think about the importance of relationship and the importance of rating coming from an agency like OECD. The other aspect I would like to focus your attention on is the fact that OECD, but international agencies become political. When I say political, I mean that they are strongly influenced by foreign policies, especially over the past few years. So the influence of foreign policy on these organizations, which are technical organizations, because if you think that OECD, well, actually, Marshall Plan was the forerunner of OECD, so reconstruction in Europe, and if we want to, we talk about growth, investments, economy, G20 that OECD offers a secretariat is aimed at fighting against economic crisis since 1990s because we thought that the G7 group was not enough. And actually G7 was born to counteract and to fight economic crisis in the mid-70s. So we should consider the political influence of technical agencies and OECD in particular, because OECD, especially OECD includes a number of countries which are like-minded, so to say. But what is the problem? If current crisis contributed to recompact, so to say, the north or industrialized countries, to unite them, there is more and more, we have more and more a problem of outreach to the south, that is so-called developing countries or semi-industrialized countries. What we should avoid is to be spokespersons to speak on behalf of the Western world, forgetting the rest of the world. in terms of population, geography, resources, because this world is much bigger than our Western world. So this is a very important aspect to take into account. So if we have spoken of a thesis and antithesis, what is the synthesis? The fight against corruption within OECD is a very virtuous, a very positive example, because there is an interest from the north and the south of the world to fight corruption. So awareness of the phenomenon, make people understand the damage of corruption, level playing field. This means growth, investments, quality of facilities, quality of infrastructures that apply to both industrialized and developing countries, but also to the countries that are not industrialized. So when we speak of corruption and inclusiveness, legal diplomacy and fight against corruption is highly inclusive, and Italian national interest is very important in this path. Thank you very much. And now we will listen to the other representative of OECD, Nicolas Pineau, Deputy Director of Financial and Enterprises Affairs. I'm asking specific questions on OECD Convention for Corruption of Public Officers, International Affairs.
So good morning. Thank you for the invitation. I think Ambassador Sabatucci laid out very eloquently how the OECD in general is working. So I'd like to focus on the Anti-Bribery Convention. So the OECD is actually providing the Secretariat of the Working Group on Bribery of the OECD, which comprises 44 parties to the convention, the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. So 44 parties that have actually signed and put into force a treaty that codifies this convention. This convention is really important. This is the only international instruments that really focuses on foreign bribery. Of course, my colleague Shervin will talk certainly about UNCAC, and foreign bribery is actually one of the provision of UNCAC, but the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention really focuses only on foreign bribery, and to be more specific, on the supply side of foreign bribery. So it requires from its parties, it's 44 parties, so it's more, by the way, than the OECD members. It's the 38 OECD members plus 6 emerging market economies. So it requires from the 44 parties to actually put in place a system to criminalize foreign bribery. In doing so, it establishes a sort of a global playing field across corporations in order to avoid that those corporations compete on an international level by providing bribes in order to get international contracts. So it was really conceived as such as an instrument to level the playing field internationally in international economic transactions. And in particular, one of the key features of the convention is that it establishes the corporate liability, so the liability of legal persons. So not only natural persons, individual can be prosecuted for foreign bribery, but corporations themselves can be prosecuted. One also interesting element, which is not really in the convention itself, but that was developed as part of the implementation of the convention, is that it was put an end to the tax deductibility of bribes. Because this today may seem completely incredible, but bribes in foreign commercial transactions used to be deductible by the government. So in a way, there was a sort of a green light, if not clearly an incentive that was given to companies by their governments to actually use bribes in commercial transactions. And one of the effect of the convention was to put an end to this tax deductibility, which was really a sort of really a breakthrough. Maybe one word on the just endorsed 2021 recommendation, anti-bribery recommendation, which was so adopted last year by the 44 parties to the convention, which in a way ensures that the convention remains state-of-the-art in terms of the fight against bribery. And I would like, in particular, so it basically takes stock of the trends and the recent developments in the space of corruption, and as I said, make sure that the convention is up to date. I'd like to emphasize two elements there. The first one is that in this recommendation, there is a standard on non-trial resolutions. NTRs. So NTRs are actually negotiated settlements of bribery enforcement actions between the prosecution and the corporations that is prosecuted. It's actually, we've seen out of experience that it's a very effective way of avoiding trials and to actually settle cases. Of course, this type of settlement, which is negotiated, needs to come with some safeguards, needs to come with transparency, and the recommendation codifies the kind of safeguards that needs to go with the use of NTRs. And it's interesting to see that Italy is actually resorting largely to this kind of scheme, of tool, in particular with the system of pateggiamento. And we want to commend Italy for using this scheme. It was actually very successful in settling some of the recent cases of foreign bribery. At the same time, the Working Group on Bribery encourages Italy to introduce perhaps more transparency in the use of this pateggiamento scheme. The other aspect is whistleblower protection. It's obviously one key aspect of the fight against foreign bribery. In the convention, there was a definition of what whistleblower protection is. In the recommendation that was adopted last year, there is a specification of how whistle protection should be ensured. And it's also interesting to see that Italy is putting in place, to be in accordance, in compliance with the European Directive on whistleblower protection, is putting in place a legislative framework to protect whistleblowers. So I stop there. Thank you.
Grazie, Mr. Pinot. Shervi Mailesi.
Thank you, Mr. Pinot. I move on to Mr. Shervi Mailesi, head of the section supporting the Convention against Corruption and Economic Crimes. I would like to know from him the state of the art of the implementation of this convention at national level, and of course also the next steps.
Thank you very much. Buongiorno, and it's a great honor and privilege for me to join you this morning, or now this afternoon rather, on behalf of the United Nations. I represent the Secretariat of the UN Convention Against Corruption, and not only I'm very glad to be with you on my institutional capacity, but also on a very personal note, started my career working in this area in the early days, almost 20 years ago, working on a global corruption case, the UN Oil for Food investigation, but I had the privilege of working with several also Italian agencies who are present here today, Guardia di Finanza and the prosecutors' offices. So it's great to be with you to talk about the state of play with the UN Convention Against Corruption. And I want to connect that also reference to the convention with how we started today, with the tribute to Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, two characters whose influence and presence goes well beyond Italy. In fact, these were two characters whose spirit was very much present when the UN conventions on transnational organized crime and then later UN Convention on against corruption were negotiated. So there actually itself starts the presence and influence of Italy in the legal, so-called legal diplomacy, which led to creation of these conventions. Now we are almost on the cusp of the 20th anniversary of the UN Convention Against Corruption. 2023 will be the 20th anniversary of this convention, so it's still a very young, relatively speaking, it's a very young instrument. It's just finishing its teen years. It's turning into a younger adolescent. And a lot has happened, of course, during the past 20 years, including with the participation of Italy. So this morning, Minister Tajani talked about importance of international cooperation in this area. And of course, the creation of the convention was not only in relation to creating global norms in dealing with corruption in all areas that we have been talking about today, but also to really focus on this aspect of improving international cooperation and asset recovery globally in the area of corruption. Now, in order to measure how we are doing in implementation of this convention, a few years after the convention was created in 2003, almost 6 years later, in 2009, countries agreed to create an implementation review mechanism for this convention, which is a very important way of looking at how countries are performing their obligations under this convention. We don't have, of course, an international police to look at this, so we needed a mechanism for everyone to measure how actually these obligations are met. So far we have had two cycles of review of this convention, focusing on different chapters, different provisions, which cover prevention of corruption, criminalization and law enforcement, international cooperation, and asset recovery. And I'm glad to report that Italy went through both cycles of review in the past few years. This is globally has created very interesting information. So far, out of 188 countries which are going through these reviews, I have to say 189 parties to the convention have joined already this instrument, and 188 of those are subject to review under this convention. Out of the reviews which are completed, and it's an ongoing process, of course, we have identified over 8,000 implementation gaps across two review cycles globally. And this includes over 1,000 implementation gaps just with regard to mutual legal assistance, so in the area of international cooperation, which of course highlights how much more we need to do globally in this area. We have also identified 1,400 good practices across both cycles, which include some related to Italy that I will quickly mention. Furthermore, we have identified 4,000 technical assistance needs across 100 countries. So this very much connects to what was said in the previous session by Comandante Zaffarana and Comandante Luzzi, mentioning also the importance of institutions with capacity in countries in the West, in Italy, to work with other countries to assist them in the areas that they need assistance. So we have information from 80% of states on measures taken after the reviews so far, and that brings me to highlighting a few elements related to the reviews of Italy, which were completed in 2013 for the first cycle and 2015 for the second cycle of 2017 for the second cycle of these reviews. Several very interesting elements were identified as good practices in Italy, including, for instance, the all crimes approach taken with regard to money laundering offenses, comprehensive measures in relation to liability of legal persons, which is a very important element, which was also mentioned by Nicola, our colleague from OECD, and wide scope and practice for confiscation of proceeds of crime, very much related to what Director Corda mentioned earlier. There is more. I can go on. The information is available publicly on our website on the executive summaries of Italy's review for the first and second cycle. So I won't go further into that given the limited time. But in terms of state of play, I want to also highlight other developments in the past couple of years. One is last year we had a UN General Assembly special session against corruption to build on what was achieved so far on the convention and areas which were not dealt with at the time of adoption of the convention. So this was very important. A political declaration came out of that. Italy was actively involved in the negotiations related to that political declaration to highlight some other elements where we need to look at the global anti-corruption agenda. New, also more recent issues which are highlighted, connection to development, to security, to human rights, as well as recommitting or strengthening the commitment of countries at the global level to anti-corruption action, but also more concrete practical measures, including creation of a new global operational network of anti-corruption law enforcement authorities, or GLOBI network. This was a step for us to move from the text of the convention into more a real kind of action for cooperation, international cooperation in relation to the convention, to connect directly the anti-corruption law enforcement agencies at the global level to each other so that they can engage in more efficient cooperation. This is very much related to what we are discussing here today in terms of legal diplomacy, but also I would say a step further into judicial diplomacy, perhaps. I will stop here and maybe come back again later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Signor Mr. Mailesi.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mailesi. From the United Nations, we move on to the European Commission with Felix Fernandez-Shaw, with whom we try to go more in depth in the technical assistance programs in terms of justice and security financed by the European Union and realized by Italy. What is the role of Italy in this type of activity? Thank you.
Grazie, buongiorno.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
I wanted, first of all, to thank Italy for inviting us to be here today. And maybe I wanted to pick up where my colleague from the UN left it, which is on the operational side of things. I think we hear on the side of the fight against corruption lots of big words, both in the global scene and in the regulatory scene, and we need to understand how important it is that the law enforcement people talk to each other across borders, that they connect, that they interact, and they work together to fight corruption, but also that they share experiences and lessons of how things are done and implemented specifically in each country. And this is where the European Commission is working together. I'm going to explain more particularly the case of Latin America and the Caribbean, also because in the OECD, Latin America is very well present. But of course, with Latin America and the Caribbean, we have a long-standing tradition of cooperation in these areas. particularly with a number of agencies, of European agencies. And here I would like to pay tribute to the work ILA, the Italian Institute for Latin America and the Caribbean. They're working very closely with us, and Antonella Cavallari and Giovanni Tartaglia, who are also implementing with us these programs. What they do basically is try to put a face to all these words. Try to bring together people in the border. We have a program called Eurofront, where we actually work together with border guards in 7 posts in Latin America and the Caribbean, where they are trying to train and also work together in seizure, in asset seizure, proceeds of crime, but also proceeds of corruption. We have a program on drugs. We have a program more widely on bringing together prosecutors and magistrates to speak and to exchange. And then we also have, together with Eurojust and Europol, a number of networks that work on operational issues. And this is where I think the whole question gets real, as my colleague from the UN was saying, is we really need to get operational, and we really need to get working down with specific people that need training, but also need support and need to work over the borders. The work that Italy is doing there is together with other member states of the European Union, with other agencies from France, from Spain, from Portugal, from Germany. But I think that the kind of experience Italy has is probably unique in this regard, and brings a lot of added value to the work that we're doing. Particularly, I can speak about the Latin American issue. I think there's another element where we would want to go back to the big words is, of course, investments, and the way in which the global conversation is going on in a number of policies. One of the big problems we have with corruption is that corruption undermines competition by working, of course, as you all know, in a different way. And that is a problem also from our point of view in the European Commission on promoting development, promoting democracy, and promoting solidarity. So it is not only or particularly a criminal issue, it's also a sustainable development problem. That we face when people take decisions based on different criteria than quality and sustainability. And this, I think, is one of the main elements that we would like to portray in the next summit that we're going to have, the European Union and CELAC, the Latin American countries' community of states, probably next year in Brussels, where we will want to speak about investment. But you cannot speak about investment without speaking about the competition and without speaking about the level playing field. This is very important also from the point of view of the approach, because sometimes we in Europe, and I think we in the multilateral organizations, we tend to speak too much about how things should be done. And maybe that's not the right message. The right message probably has to be how things benefit and who they benefit. And this is where I think we will be better heard across the globe. Thanks.
Grazie, Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez-Show. Let's move on from the international field. Let's come back to the national field, and we move on to a sector that has been mentioned often. So we go to Confindustria, Raffaele Langella, the Director of International Affairs at Confindustria. Very often we hear about one of the needs of a greater partnership, a greater collaboration between the public and private sector in the fight against criminality and illegality in some of these fields. I mean, let's talk about the role of Confindustria in this type of operations. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation I have received to participate in this very interesting conference. I'm one of the last speakers, and so I think that I may say that all the issues that have been hinted and raised in the previous speeches are very important. Well, industry is one of the main victims of the corruption phenomenon. The corruption modifies the normal rules on which the markets functions, destroys the level playing field, creates problems to many economic operators. So Confindustria is at the forefront in the fight against corruption, and we do it also at international level. Of course, at national level, we have a series of codes of conduct, and all the members of Confindustria have to apply and comply with these codes of conduct. But we also operate at international level by participating in the main fora that discussed the fight against corruption. Last year, as you know, Italy has been the chair of the G20. One branch of the G20 is the B20, and it is an organization that is made up by all the businesses that more or less come from all the countries that participate in the G20. We may say that more or less all the countries represented in the G20 have their own delegation in the B20. And for the first time, we succeeded in all membership except for performance indicators that are directly or indirectly connected with the phenomenon of corruption. First of all, in the terms of public tenders, we obtained a consensus on the need of responsible behavior by businesses and governments in the preparation and implementation of public tenders. And this, on our point of view, is done by training the operators that then have to produce the public tenders, those who are responsible of the platforms, the tendering platforms. And so we train the executive of the public administration in all countries that want to open the public tendering to international competition. Another indicator is the use of the best available technology to prevent corruption phenomena. Technology is there. Very often it allows to carry out some pre-investigations that can create some alarms, also in the case of the control authorities in terms of violation of rules, of laws, and therefore it is the task of the national industry in every different country participating in the B20 to make it possible for these laws to be respected by the use of this technology. The second point concerns another point concerns the improvement of the governance of the industries through especially the adoption of shared standards. You know, Procurator Melillo said it very well. I mean, this is the sector in which we find many gaps in which that these corrupted people can use. We promote the Falcone Convention also, and then we have another indicator of performance concerning compliance regulations that involve stronger collaboration between the public and private sector and introduce some elements that reward those administrations that show that they are better in implementing these laws against corruption. And last but not least, another indicator is the improvement of access to registries so that we can understand very well the effective ownership, and very soon the effective ownership. That is one of the problems that you have to meet and solve when you do a public tender. These are indicators that have been approved by the B20 last year and have been confirmed by the B20 in Indonesia that took place 2 weeks ago. And we have already some contacts underway with the Indian government, with the Indian industry, let's say. We hope that all that could be continued and further stressed when the B20 meets again next year in India. Then there is the OECD context we mentioned already, and we participate at this level as Confindustria. We have a significant presence in the fight against corruption with Mr. Nicolò Allocca, that is president of the Anti-Corruption Commission, and he was appointed by Confindustria to that. I conclude, because time is short, at least I don't have more time. We said earlier that mafia and all criminal phenomena are one step ahead vis-à-vis of the repression ability of law enforcement agencies. This is true, partly, but we also have tools that can be used to improve our ability of anticipating some phenomena or possibly avoiding that these phenomena arise. So I'm referring in particular to the steering group. The steering group of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs could be one useful tool to combat corruption phenomena, and we could discuss about best practices in the public and private sector so that these best practices could become the norm and the exception could become bribery in public tendering. I'm referring, and this is my personal opinion and has nothing to do with the role I cover in Confindustria, I refer to innovative financing, decentralizing financing, all the innovations that have been carried out in the last years at the fintech level. Now, it is true that the European Union is taking some tools, is adopting some tools that could interpret and possibly regulating a sector that risks of being the growing field for many illicit activities. But it is also true that the steering group, if used very well, could help us to anticipate this situation and make us ready to face the situation when it comes. Thank you, Director Langella. I would go for a further round of the table, and then I would leave at the end of the floor to Ambassador Lo Monaca for the conclusion. President Busia, let's come back to the issue of the National Resilience and Recovery Plan and the role of ANAC in this situation. How are you getting organized? How are you operating? Well, yes. We are a supervisory authority on public tendering, and I connect with the last speaker and what he said. We have inserted that in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan because many resources are raising a lot of appetites, and we cannot afford that this money goes into the wrong hands. We have to digitalize the entire procedure of the tender from the first to the end of it. This makes it faster, but also more. We will be able to control it better, and so in this way we could reward the better companies, and so we could set up a real alliance between public and private sector in transparency and in the adoption of all that. This is a vital tool, and has been will be possible thanks to the national database of public tendering that we have at ANAC. We are doing it. We will do it, and this is an element that is part of the National Resilience and Recovery Plan. It is a qualifying element. And I conclude by saying that today we have seen how essential it is to combat corruption and prevent corruption, which is the field in which we move. And it is convenient to invest in prevention of corruption. It's convenient from the economic point of view because we don't waste resources. It is convenient from the institutional point of view, the international point of view, because we give a good image of our country, and in exchange we have foreign investments. And it is convenient because it is an essential guarantee, because corruption is hitting the weakest, but it's also a guarantee, what we are doing, a guarantee of social cohesion. So I conclude by thanking the Direction of Globalization, Dr. Porcini, and all the people who have worked in this sector. From this moment on, we have a commitment that has to go towards this direction, and we need, as country, to do that, and as country we can make the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, President Busia, Director Bruno Corda, you said that the National Agency for Seized and Confiscated Assets, it's very important to use companies to also work on the labor market, to clean the labor market and the economic market. Is that so? Yeah, absolutely, because I think that the main element in our case is to keep jobs and employment and avoid or prevent the labor market from being managed by organized crime. Labor market means agreement, so we do not have to oblige populations to give right to organized crime, and they should lose the consensus. Therefore, so we will have to work a lot on this as well as on something else. Support from companies must find the right socioeconomic fabric that can support them, and we should have legal economy providing its support to avoid shock of legality, because there are companies that do not pay social contributions to their or the wage to their employees to a situation of legality. Not all the companies can be recovered, so to say.
Delle scatole vuote.
Many of the companies we heard from previous speakers there were only companies producing fake bills or invoices or that were used for money laundering. So we want companies that deserve to be on the market. We want to bring them back to a situation of legality. And legal economy then will see the eradication of this, elimination of these competitors in the market. Okay, thank you, Director Corda. I would like to ask Luca Sabatucci and Nicolas Pinot the same question, because you mentioned the relationship between OECD report on Italy and Italy's activity against corruption. Much was done and much has to be done still. Thank you. Yes, I would like to answer your question in a rather provocative way. That is, we sometimes see a misleading relationship between the figures of law enforcement and corruption. That is, and especially when we are speaking of this report. Now, to put it simple, sometimes it appears that the more corrupted is a country because it contrasts or fights corruption, but it's the other way around. It's because you fight corruption that a country is less corrupted than others. If Italy is now at the 48th place in the ranking, and I'm sure that there are countries which have a better ranking than ours, but which have legal systems and implementation systems which are less advanced than our Italian system. And so since you don't see corruption, corruption does not exist. And all this, of course, has an impact on the economic trend because depending on the place in the ranking will move investment and capital, and this has an impact on economic growth. And I go back to the core business of diplomats defending, protecting our national interest. I think it's important to explain it's important that fighting against corruption does not mean being a corrupted country. And from this viewpoint, this is the Italian delegation, the commitment of Italian delegation at OECD. Mr. Pinot?
Yes, thank you. I'll be quick because I know that we are running over time. Of course, I don't have time to delve into the specific of, I understand there was a bit of controversy following the publication of the Phase 4 report of the Working Group on Bribery. with some messages on the number of dismissals and acquittals. But I really want instead to really focus on the positive messages from this Phase 4 report. The first aspect is that what this report is actually signaling is a significant level of enforcement of the foreign bribery offense, in particular compared to other WGB countries and parties. And what we've seen also is the pace of enforcement that is increasing since the Phase 3 report in 2011. So that's a very good sort of a good trend. We are also signaling in this report that there have been a significant improvement to the legislative framework against foreign bribery offense, in particular the lengthening of statute limitation for natural person, the increase in the imprisonment terms and disqualification sanctions. There was, as I mentioned before, the introduction of whistleblower protection provisions in the public sector. There is here some disparity between the public and the private sector, but again, the trend is very positive. We are also referring to the establishment of a specialized department in the Milan prosecutor's office to tackle foreign bribery, which is really a good practice and really the signal, a testament of the commitment from Italy to really fight against foreign bribery. And also, as was mentioned this morning, really a consequent significant investment to modernize and digitize the judiciary. And I would say more from a sort of international perspective, Italy has really been over the last years a leader of the fight against corruption at the international level. During the G20 presidency last year, the OECD worked very closely with Italy on some of the things that have been mentioned this morning, on measurement, on integrity in sport. We were really grateful to Italy that the chair of the G20 was a champion for the Anti-Bribery Convention and obtained from other G20 members, in particular those G20 members that are not yet parties to the convention, to really commit to explore the adherence to the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. So Italy is really playing a leading role at the international level in the fight against foreign bribery, and the OECD wants to continue partnering with Italy next year in the context of the G7. Thank you.
Grazie Mr. Pinault anche per questo.
Thank you, Mr. Pinault. Thank you for this appreciation for what Italy is doing in terms of anti-bribery. Mr. Milesi, you mentioned earlier the cooperation. I mean, you strengthened this cooperation at more levels and at international level. You said that a lot has been done, but still a lot remains to be done. But starting from what?
Thank you very much. So in terms of international cooperation, I think at two levels I would look at it. One is at the policy level, that, as I mentioned, there is more to be done. I refer to some of the activities in the past years. We are now looking ahead for the next Conference of State Parties to the UN Convention Against Corruption next year in the United States. We are looking at the next phase of our review mechanism, and this will continue together with the follow-up on the political declaration for the UN General Assembly Special Session Against Corruption, will form the next steps for policy dialogue at the global level. As was mentioned, Italy has taken a leading role in these areas, including, as Nicolas mentioned, on the G20 working group against corruption. But I think in this policy dialogue also there is much more to be done to improve cooperation. So including a resolution that Italy is interested in presenting in relation to corruption and organized crime, very important issue, I think, and Italy is very well placed to push for that policy dialogue globally. That would certainly be important for international cooperation. The next element is at the operational level. So the policy level and the operational level. And operational level, really, this GLOBI network that I mentioned is something which is looking at connecting more and more countries. OECD has been doing a very important job in this area among OECD countries and beyond that. But at the UN, we want to also do this at a more global level. So far, we have 127 authorities that have joined from 69 countries. And we hope to expand this pool of authorities who are working directly for corruption and asset recovery cases. And we are certainly looking forward to welcoming Italy also within this group, not only to engage in cooperation, but also to share the expertise and experience, particularly in areas like financial investigations, on asset recovery, and on international cooperation that was mentioned. So we do draw very regularly on Italian expertise in these areas, including also on the area of asset management and social reuse of assets, which is very important experience in Italy, and we look forward in drawing more from these areas for international cooperation. Thank you.
Grazie, Mr. Mailesi. Andiamo adesso.
Thank you, Mr. Mailesi. Let's move on to Mr. Felix Fernandez Show. Mr. Mailesi has stressed the need of putting together more countries and more realities. You mentioned earlier another important aspect, investments, how important investments are. We can do more in this sector, do you think?
Yes, thank you. I think we can always try to improve the way in which private companies and public government officials link to each other in promoting a sufficient legal environment free of corruption and a level playing field. I think the place to do that conversation is not only in the government-to-government exchanges that the UN colleagues and the OECD in the framework of the different conventions, but it's also by promoting practices that we have here in Europe and that we have in other OECD countries, and by allying ourselves with companies, local companies and European companies that want to invest and for which corruption is an obstacle for investment. And is a wrong kind of competition that we're setting up towards, because the moment you have corruption in the middle of an investment program, there's a race to the bottom or to the top. Never know what the top or the bottom is going to be. And that is where I think we need to be very clear, and we need to also state our interests and the government's interests. The clearer, the more level playing field an investment arena has in a given country, the better it is in the end for its sustainable development, for reaching the lower classes. I think Nicolas Pinot was saying that. But that's where I think we can work a bit more, and that's why it's also very good to have not only here representatives of prosecutors and international organizations, but also have the companies and the industry who really understand this very well. Thank you.
Grazie, grazie mille.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Show. And now we conclude with Mr. Langella. You have seen, Mr. Langella, the need of putting together the public and private sector and the role of the companies. What are the proposals that the industry world is putting forward at all levels when it is called to provide its contribution?
Semplificazione. Prima, molto opportunamente, nella prima parte.
First of all, a proposal to simplify simplification, because previously in the previous part of this, in the previous seminar, some people said that too many laws may nullify the effort of our fight. So the more the rules, the more the laws, the more the acts of parliament, the more the more laws contradicting with one another, and the easier is for corrupted and corrupter to to take advantage of the situation. So simplification first. Second, cultural effort, so to say, because in Italy we tend to legislate to avoid crimes, but what might avoid crimes instead or towards might so instead we should spread the culture of corruption or against corruption in our institutions. In Confindustria, we have Probability College, which is very strict, and we have results. So if a member from our Confindustria, if a member from our association diverts or breaches the rules of the association, it's expelled from the association. Less than a minute. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to thank all the speakers of the last panel, President Busia, Director Bruno Corda, Sabatucci, Nicolas Pinot, Charvin Mailesi, Felix Fernandez Shaw, and Dr. Langella. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for attending this last session. And I would like to thank the organizers, and I congratulate them on this organization, because bringing to the fore this topic to the attention of citizens, press. It's an important theme, and what our government is doing also in terms of international cooperation. This is very important. It's very important to pay attention to that. I leave the floor to Dr. Tartaglia and Ambassador Lo Monaco for conclusions. Yes, very quick message. Today, we received a message from the public prosecutor of the Court of Account, General Attorney of Court of Accounts, and this will be given to you because it's both in English and in Italian. And now Vincenzo Lo Monaco, Director General for Global Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Thank you. Yes, I organized this event with you, and I would like to thank my team for this beautiful day. I will be very short, promised, because it's almost 2 o'clock and we have a great buffet waiting for us. So I don't want to spend too more time on that, because I think that today anything has been said. Everything, the most important messages have been conveyed. And these messages were conveyed most effectively. I would like to thank the participants, starting from the speakers, starting from our moderators, and the speakers of our panels, and we will capitalize on their of course, on their speeches, on the information they provided us with. I know that there were many people following us online, and we're very happy. And amongst the others, and this is my take-home message, we were happy to have here in this room with us. I don't know if they left. Anyway, they are the students of the University of Tor Vergata for Master Anti-Corruption Master, Tor Vergata and Luis. I would like to thank the students, university students. I would like to thank them because the take-home message today, the key message of this event is for our youth, for our young people that will be the protagonist of the future, and they must be involved, they must be protected, they must be involved in such themes, because it's a cultural issue. Fight against corruption is a cultural issue, and it's mainly we have to pay attention to our students. It's very important for protection of human rights, to promote sustainable development, democracy, peace, and it's And this is so that's why this day wants to leave a legacy for them. So everything has been said. We said that a fight against corruption, and I want to underline this, is not a regional fact, is not a local fact, is an issue that is of interest of anyone. It's cross-sectional, so it has to be dealt with by all institutions, and the presence of different institutions, governmental agencies underline this, the importance of working together, and of course, we have to work both on a national level, because we know that at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, there is an interinstitutional panel working on this, and but we'll also have to work on the international level. And Minister Tajani mentioned that in his speech. He underlined that the fight against corruption will be the object of a proposal at the G7 meeting. We had the institutions, agencies, OECD, and other important agencies that work hand in hand with us. Another message was conveyed by Dr. Langella from Confindustria. That is, we have to break the barriers in public and private sector. So having an interaction, a dialogue with between the employers world, business world, and the media and the press. And a message for our beautiful Italy, what we can give to the others with the support of everyone. Thank you. And good work.